Hey, Trekkie2409 here, with my review of the 1/100 scale Master Grade Sazabi version Ka. Today we're going to be looking at the inner frame. But first, let's take a look at the box. And this thing is huge! Perhaps even a bit bigger than it should be. On the side we see a list of all the weapons and the specs and everything, and a load of pictures of the kit, as well as a few nice close-ups of some of the detail. And the other side of the box lists the features, with a couple more pictures of the completed kit. The manual is really nice, pretty much like any other version Ka kit. Unfortunately, unlike recent manuals, it does not have any English, which is a shame because it has a lot of writing about the Sazabi which I would really like to be able to read. The manual also doesn't list the runners required for each subassembly, which is a shame. I think it's something that pretty much all manuals should do, and especially on a kit this size. It's really handy to know exactly what runners you'll need for each section of the build. And this kit comes with a whopping 27 runners. And at the end of the manual here we have the decal placement guide in lovely, glorious, full colour. And here we have the inner frame, and this thing looks amazing. And it definitely feels very Zeon. It actually reminds me quite a lot of the Gelgoog's inner frame, to be honest. Just in the overall aesthetic. But honestly, what really makes the inner frame look so good is the colour separation used for the transformation. It really adds a lot to the inner frame, and adds a lot of extra painting options if you wanted to just display the inner frame by itself, which I actually plan on doing if I get a second one of these. This kit definitely does have its problems though, mostly so far in what I've built so far, in its build experience and difficulty. Pretty much entirely, I imagine, due to it being a Daban kit. Some of the parts just don't fit together very well and require far too much force. My thumbs still hurt, and it's been almost a week I think now since I built this inner frame, and they're still sore from the amount of force required in certain places to only almost fit parts correctly. Loads of parts still don't fit correctly. Like the shoulders, for example, have a bit of a gap in the middle of them on the inner frame, and it took a lot of pressing to get it down to that small of a gap. The single biggest gap are probably the thighs. They just will not go together properly. I've pressed and pressed and pressed and done everything I can, and there's still a gap. But pretty much by far the worst subsection of this kit to build is definitely the waist. It has been a bit of a nightmare. Not really the front or side skirts, they've been fine, but the rest of it has a lot of fit issues. There's a part of the waist that goes over the other main two parts of the waist, and it has a kind of clipping mechanism, like it's like a couple bits on it so that once it's on, it's clipped in and stays on, but it would just not go on. It required so much force. I had to basically cut those bits off that would clip in, not entirely, but mostly, and it was still really hard. And those two parts that it had to go over as well were quite difficult to get together properly. And the rear waist skirt, I've basically only been able to half assemble because I plan on painting this kit, and I'm going to need to take it apart and everything again, and it's not something I normally do. I normally paint as I build rather than building it and taking it apart again. And so the waist skirt I've kind of had to mostly assemble, but it's not quite there. There's a bit I can't really show that's one of the first bits of assembling the waist, and how it goes together. It just requires so much force and balancing to do between the two bits you have to push in. And then there's two thrusters in the middle section of the back waist skirt that don't go on very easily and need a lot of force, and I've had to basically just kind of place them on there and not put them on properly so that I can actually get them off in future. And doing the waist was just a very difficult and fiddly process. I think though probably the overall worst part of this kit and other Daban kits that use these hands is the hands. Just getting them off the runner is horrible. The same kind of hands come with the Daban New Gundam version Ka, which I've also got, and I broke one because Daban clearly doesn't have the technology that Bandai has to do these hands, so they've, I think, basically just copied the original runner with the hands on them and then added another runner on top and attached extra bits to that because they can't do it with as little connections as Bandai uses. So there's a lot more connections and they're in really stupid places to try and cut off. I recommend, if you get this kit or one that uses those hands, just carefully cut off one of the runners first, the kind of top extra one. You should be able to tell which one that is. Don't worry too much about getting things cut very close to the hands or anything, just get that runner off and then work on getting the hand out of the basically Bandai runner, and again do the same. Don't worry about getting things cut close to the hands, just get them off the runner and then slowly and very carefully and very gently throughout the whole process of the hands start trimming everything else off because it's so badly designed. So far though, with just the inner frame, the kit's actually very stable and not too finicky like a lot of kits with a lot of moving parts can be, so no stability or sturdiness issues so far at least, except maybe in parts of the transformation because it's not designed to transform as just the inner frame, it's designed to have armour parts on it, like the extra shoulder part for example. Trying to transform that just has it kind of pop out and not do what it's supposed to. The articulation so far though is looking really good. The head has a limited side to side movement and no real upward movement, but a lot of down movement. Once the armour's on, it won't really be able to move up anyway because of what the armour's like. The waist has a good side to side movement, full 360, and other than that, nothing special at all. Standard Gundam waist, not much movement there at all, but at least as just the inner frame, slightly more movement than you quite often get. The arms can go way up to the side. It kind of seems like those big shoulders would maybe limit that a little, but nope. The shoulders can come out a little bit to the front, but not very much. The arms have a full 360 degree biceps rotation and can go full 360 degree forward and stuff. And the elbow has a full, basically 180 degree movement. The legs come forward a good amount, but if you bring them forward too much, they might start colliding with the front waist skirts. If you move the waist skirts around a bit first though, it should be fine. The backwards movement of the leg is a bit limited by the back waist skirt, but the back waist skirt does move, so you can increase that by just pulling the back waist skirt up. The connection for that's a bit tight to move just by moving the leg and pushing the waist skirt out of the way. The knees have a great range of movement as well, pretty much a full 180 degrees, and the ankles too are also perfectly fine. Have a good forward and back range of movement and really definitely rather good side to side movement. And so finally let's just do some quick size comparisons. First up, next to the old classic Granddaddy Gundam 3.0, and here you really see the size difference. You can also see that the Sazabi stands at a full 9 inches tall, which is really giant for an MG. That's most PGs are only 11 inches. Here's it next to the 1/100 scale Barbatos Lupus and the Banshee in Unicorn mode. Hey, that's something. Is the Banshee's Unicorn mode called Unicorn mode because it's not the unicorn? And its horn is different and more complex and not as unicorny. But anyway, again, you can clearly see how massive this thing is here again, and this is without the armour. The armour adds quite a lot of extra bulk, especially to the lower legs. And of course there's no backpack on this thing yet. Next to the HG Barbatos and the MG Sinanju, just for a little comparison with an HG, and of course Char's kind of next mobile suit. Although the Sinanju is still up on its stand because I don't really want to take it off, sorry. The paint is a bit fragile and I don't really want to play about with it too much. So that makes the Sinanju look quite a lot bigger, but in reality the Sazabi is definitely bigger than the Sinanju. And finally, the only comparison that matters, the new Gundam. Again, I've just left the new Gundam on its stand because even more than the Sinanju, that is a nightmare to move and take off the stand. The Sinanju doesn't really have any problems as a kit itself, I just don't want to ruin the paint job. But the new Gundam, oh boy is that stand annoying. Just the way it connects to the stand in the first place is really hard to do, and then of course you've got all the funnels and it's just... Anyway, I'm not supposed to be talking about the new Gundam. And that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the full review once I've got the armour on and everything. But I thought it would be fun to take a look at just the inner frame, especially seeing as, like I said, I hope to get another one at some point and paint it up and just display the inner frame on its own. Spoilers though, if you're looking at the Daban version, I really can't recommend it. I have started putting on some of the armour by the time I'm recording the audio for this, and that's been kind of just as bad at a couple of places, fit wise and build wise. Really, definitely just recommend getting the Bandai version. I know it's essentially twice the price, I think, but for such an amazing kit, it's such a shame to have these problems. And I would definitely recommend it even less for a beginner. The Sazabi in general might seem a bit much for a beginner, but personally I think that basically every Gunpla kit I've built so far would be fine for a beginner. But then again, I started on Star Trek kits that don't come painted or anything that need glued and all that, and really you're just following instructions, it's not too hard. Just take your time. You can do any kit as a beginner, really, except maybe this one. The only thing I would avoid as a beginner are kits like this with major fit issues, just because they'll be so frustrating. They're frustrating even if you're not a beginner, and you might start to doubt yourself, and if it's you if you're a beginner. And if it's you if you're the problem, and not the kit if you're a beginner. Whereas it's definitely the kit. In this case, the fit issues are literally sore. So if you plan on building this kit, I hope you have some calluses or something. But that's all for now. We'll see what I think once the armour's on, and just have a look at what is basically guaranteed to be a gorgeous kit. Until next time, bye.